Make it down to Cross last week?
I did not. With y'all.
Stayed in town? Got the Football in Focus from Teed Up Indoors on Battleground Avenue. Back for another week of football talk. Got Mike Fanning with us from Grimsley, back again tonight. Going back to the game, had to throw the ball a lot in the fourth quarter. Kind of Weddington took away Grimsley's running attack, forced Grimsley to throw the ball. And then I also saw where Weddington been throwing the ball some. They went to the running game. They kind of flip-flopped it some and kind of changed it last week. When Grimsley's running attack is away, they got to throw the ball. It seemed like it changed things for Grimsley somewhat.
Yeah, it did. I mean, Grimsley, we'd seen them play just high intensity, fast-paced football all season long, and unfortunately, the script was really flipped there in the second half when they had to go on the road to a Weddington team. Obviously, was hungry about what happened last year. And anytime you're going to go on the road in the playoffs, kind of throw some of that game plan stuff out the window, especially with how familiar these teams are. Good coaching on both sides of the football,
right.
Like you mentioned.
Now, Andy Capone, I noticed him from Weddington's had a lot of success there. He's done a very good job in that team. So it wasn't like they weren't going to be ready. They were playoff tested, like you mentioned, last year, 28-27 game at Grimsley, lost by a point. So they were ready for it. And it looked like to me, too, that Weddington was able to run the ball in Grimsley. As far as Grimsley's defense goes, what kind of happened there?
Well, sometimes you hear this term in the NFL where things get a little sticky up front. And, Grimsley's been able to kind of work off a lot of those offensive blocks. And I tell you, this is where Coach Capone should take a lot of credit. They identified, it was a game of second half adjustments. They identified in the first half, hey, we were able to kind of push the Grimsley front four around a little bit. And they used that to their advantage in the second half. And there's some things you got to factor into that, too. The field conditions, going on the road. Weddington, they've been hosting home playoff games.
Turf field there or not?
No, it's a grass
straight
field.
Grass. I know Short Area's got a lot of turf fields on the Short Area there.
And as soon as I think, that's something I look at, covering Grimsley football all years. I want to look at the field conditions because when you look at the Grimsley offense, it's based around hard cuts, especially with their wide receivers to get space on either comeback routes,
like
out
putting
routes.
the old foot in the ground, right?
You see Mitchell Summers run, right? So they need the turf to really do well because when we've seen negative plays out of the Whirlies this year, whether it's the quarterback, wide receivers, running back, it's been when they've kind of tripped themselves up, when they've lost their footing. So I was keeping an eye on the footing in the first half. And then I was also keeping away with how much physicality the officials were going to let the players play with. And you could tell on both sides of the football, guys were, hands on hand. It was a very
push each other around a lot.
Push each other around. They weren't calling the holding. They weren't calling the pass interference. They were letting the guys play.
Once you see that, you got to get used to it to adjust. You can't be looking for it. You got to play on. If it's not going to be called, you just got to play through it and keep going. You talk about that field condition. I think it was a little bit warmer last week than it has been early this week. So when it was warm during the day on Friday, and it starts to cool down quickly, you get a lot of moisture on that field built up pretty fast too.
So even though the Whirlies go to the break with a 20-14 lead, and by the way, it's not 21-14, it's 20-14 because of a missed extra point because the kicker slipped on the point after. He couldn't get his plant foot.
Did he fall and bust his tail that bad, or how did it look?
No, but when he went to plant his foot, there was just no momentum with it. The body was going everything. So field conditions, physicality, what the officials were letting them play with, halftime adjustments were for Weddington in between the tackles, power runs, maybe a cut or two, but straight, and let those offensive linemen. It's a big offensive line for Weddington. They average.
You got to commend Capone, the coach, too, because he's got a quarterback. The kid's name was Budge, right?
Yeah, Tyler Budge.
Very good quarterback who can do well in the passing game. He sees that chance to run that ball, kind of scraps that passing game, pushes that running game, and goes down Grimsley's throat to some degree, and they capitalize.
Yeah, the second half adjustments you could see worked out well. Weddington only attempted 2 passes in the second half.
Wow.
When they got the football, they ran it.
Mitchell Summers ran the ball how many times in the fourth quarter? Mitchell Summers in the fourth quarter. Any?
Only had, I think, 2. Well, I have to go back and look.
Very few.
Yeah, he had 115 yards in the first half and only ends up with another 10, I think, in the rest of the game.
But 3 touchdowns, all right?
Yeah, what they did is they in the second half really stacked the box against the Whirlies. They had their 3 first half touchdowns, but they really stacked the box in the second half, really daring the Whirlies to try to throw it. And again, with the field conditions, the hard cuts, people trying to move around. They were very physical, getting in the back. I mean, it just didn't go. It just didn't go. The second half didn't script out the way I think the Whirlies wanted it to. And you talk about the field condition, the officiating, all those things. But Dale Brown will tell you, they had opportunities and just couldn't capitalize the second half.
It was, who's going to be your MVP on defense in that game? I always ask these things as we go to these players of the week. I know who the offensive MVP's got to be. Summers again, I'm sure. Got the yards, got the TDs, that type thing. Who's going to be the MVP on defense?
Well,
can you pick somebody out?
Usually, when you go on the road or you're in a playoff games, you take a look at that turnover margin. And Whirlies won it in this game. Fred Sellers had another interception.
Another stellar game from Sellers.
Yep, a third straight interception in the playoffs.
What number does he wear?
23.
Yeah,
23.
good job.
Chris Young wears 24.
I saw those numbers floating around, those balls flying around in his direction.
Yeah, and so I thought through the whole playoffs and in this game again really locked things down, forcing Weddington to have to run the football because, again, Tyler Budd, you talked about that experience, only completed 6 passes. One of those was an interception. He did everything going back to pass, seeing nothing was open, and then being able to scramble with his legs.
We've done something else so far. We hadn't even mentioned this guy's name. What about Faison Brandon? What kind of game did he have that night? Was he a quiet young sophomore? Was he a playoff sophomore getting the game done?
I praise...
Because I saw Anderson had about 100-some yards receiving.
Yeah, 7 targets, another big game for these wide receivers. They're just going to continue.
But not big enough for Taylor that night, though, right?
Yeah, I think the only knock on Brandon, who's just had an outstanding first year of being under center for the Whirlies. Well, takes everything.
Yeah.
The old expression is
signal caller.
Yeah, is that even through this entire playoffs, never turned the football over. In fact, his 3 interceptions, he hadn't turned the ball over in the last 10 games. So you want your quarterback to be poised and to be steady. And although he took some sacks in the second half, for the most part, he showed up. I mean, for a sophomore quarterback,
did his job
on the road against a good Weddington team.
Did he run the ball much?
He didn't. He didn't because Weddington was going to make him stay in the pocket. They were bringing, 6-man looks. I mean, they were bringing the house.
They didn't let him get around, move around back there.
And they were really trying to get the turnovers out of him, and he just would not do it. He would not cave. But the defense in the second half for Weddington really showed up. They used, like I said, that physicality to their advantage, and they took away some of the things that the Whirlies like to do well.
Something I did see and notice, it looked like Mitchell Summers caught a couple of passes that game, maybe 2. He only caught maybe 8 the entire year. Do you see him become more of a receiving running back next season? Maybe they might add that new wrinkle to the game maybe next year with Summers. What do you think?
On offense, yes, you lose Taylor and Anderson to D1, wide receivers with just huge catch radiuses.
And is Taylor going to leave in end of December, going January, going on to college?
I believe he may play basketball for a few weeks,
but then in
December he's going to
He'll play a couple weeks and then leave on. He'll join the team and move after that. That's kind of strange. But keep talking about these receivers,
but when you talk
about Summers.
Yeah, when the Whirlies look to next year on offense, you got the 3 guys who touch the football the most back. You got your center and Brock Weston back. You got Brandon back at quarterback. And then you have Mitchell Summers back at wide receiver. And like you said, the problem for Brown this year on offense was getting he only had 1 football. All these different guys, you're going to see their tight end, DJ Howerton, get involved.
Looks like Cato's set to be the man to step up. Caton Cato's going to step up for next year.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Is he ready?
Yeah, I think so. He's banged up all year long. And again, Anderson could get open. Taylor could get open. Cato was that third guy. He was that slot guy. Guess what? By the time you went 1, 2, 3, 1 or 2 was already open, right?
Yeah.
They just didn't get a lot of opportunities to find him the football.
But when he did, he made the most of it, it seemed like.
Absolutely. Like I said, I had to miss the first part of the season. Was a little banged up. DJ Howerton only caught 3 balls. I think he caught 2 balls in the very first game and just won the rest of the way. He's one of the tallest players on the football field. So, you're going to have him over the middle. You're going to have Summers out of the backfield. I wouldn't be surprised if you see some guys on defense switch over to the offensive side. The offense is in very good hands. You lose some beef in the middle with Andre Hill Jr.,
Andre's a senior? Wow. What kind of college call is he getting? Do you get much college attention?
I'm sure he does.
It's so doggone big, you think he would.
His size, and he really takes on 2 blockers up there. So they're going to have to tweak some things in the secondary, which had been so good. It's a shame for the Whirlies to have their season end like this. 27 points was the fewest they'd score on offense. 44 they gave up was the most they'd given up on offense. And that's the kind of script Weddington was going to have to write to come out of victory. They were going to have to get Grimsley out of character. They were going to have to do things to the Whirlies that they hadn't done all year. And
Grimsley started sitting in the playoffs. It was tougher against tough. It got tougher each week, and finally just caught up on them against Weddington. Back to the team for the year. Who's the team MVP?
For the Whirlies?
Your team, Grimsley, yes.
For the Whirlies this year, to put me on the spot.
Quick jump on that?
can I surprise you maybe a little bit? Because this is a gentleman, this is a player who surprised me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we knew. I mean, I say we knew.
You felt like it.
Let me preface this like this.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone told me Faison Brandon is going to be great. He's comfortable, and I'm like, wait a minute. He's a sophomore. He played sparingly his freshman year, but he's the, you're telling me, but you know what? As the season progressed, you're right. The coaches are right. This guy is getting it done. When Bryce Davis goes down on that defensive line, though, someone was going to have to step up and make this Grimsley defense really take on an identity of being a team that can shut you down. Ja'Kai Eason was not on my radar. Double-digit sacks in the backfield all season long. I mean, this Whirly team in conference play got 4 shutouts. And I think he was that rock that teams had to account for. Because, and I'm telling you this when I talk to all these coaches, and they're like, well, who really worries you? And then, they give you the, Summers and Faith. Then on defense, we got to make sure we know, because they move Eason around a lot. So we really got to know where these defensive ends are at. We need to know where this defensive positioning is at, because if we let this guy start disrupting any type of rhythm we have trying to pass the football, it's only going to make running the football more difficult. And
he's on the outside defensive end. Is he also on the inside, some too, defensive tackle?
They could move him around.
They shift him everywhere.
They could roll him out.
He dropped back up to the linebacker.
He was that physical on defense, somebody I was always watching wearing number 13. I was really, really impressed with, who, as the season, I'm looking at everything before the season, like, who jumps off the page? Well, the Bryce Davises and the Terrell Andersons, the Alex Taylors, but who was that guy that really stepped up week in and week out, played havoc, got all the sacks, all the tackles for losses, and every single coach I talked to said, hey, we got to make sure we know where he's at, and that would be Ja'Kai Eason. But to put me on a spot for a team MVP,
I think you're going Summers. I think you're going Summers.
Golly, so many. I mean,
when I talk about Mitchell Summers, the numbers really stand out.
By the way, you got
a
fantastic quarterback coming on here later in this show.
Oh yeah. And well, I'm talking about just for Grimsley's team.
I know.
The whole county. Because I don't take it for Atmore right now. Atmore's time is coming.
Because Atmore's coming. Yeah. So when I'm going to give you these numbers, you're going to be like, well, Atmore's sitting there going, well, you know what? Because Faison Brandon completed 69% of his passes. And Atmore coming up, I think,
more, 73. Yeah, he's more, yeah.
And he threw, 30-plus touchdowns, only threw 3 interceptions, ran for 500 yards, threw for over 3,000 yards. So he did everything and more we expected from a quarterback.
The thing he had over Atmore to a certain degree, Atmore finally got his first rushing touchdown of the season last Friday night, but Faison Brandon's running game was probably the icing on the cake, I would say. When you got that guy as a quarterback. What he could do as a runner really made a big difference. And that makes a difference in the game. Quarterback gets trapped, can't move, can't throw. Look out, he's out of the pocket. He's running the ball, and he does a great job with it. And he has great legs as far as his movement. Just watching his running stride is nice and tall and perfect almost.
Yeah, they didn't ask him to run the football a lot.
He had 500 yards, though, right?
But he ends up with 500 yards because exactly right. Yeah. When the play broke down, he could go make a play with his legs, and often they were for big gains. I think he rushed for another 9 touchdowns.
Probably had a pretty good yard per carry thing going, too.
But going back to Mitchell Summers.
Yeah, he's your MVP.
Season winds up, and you look at this, and you
the touchdowns.
You look at how teams said, you know what, we're going to stack the box, and we're going to take away the run game, and he averaged 8.9 yards.
I was going to say right at 10.
This
right at 10 yards carry.
That's for as many touches as they gave him through the course of this season, 30-plus touchdowns. Like you said, when they handed to him, all eyes, on Summers, and he goes for over 3,000 yards and goes for 8.9 yards a carry when everybody was saying, look, first thing we got to do against the Whirlies is, get pressure on the line of scrimmage, shut down their run game, test this, sophomore quarterback, and week after week, Summers showed up and gave you great game after great game. 2 games, 6 rushing touchdowns this year. So, on defense, Ja'Kai Eason just really, maybe the coaches, if the coaches were here, Rigsby and Dale Brown, they say, no, we knew he had that in him, but to see it on the field this year, to see that development and the way he impacted games, not necessarily on the stat sheet, but just the way he got pressure in the backfield without Bryce Davis there on flanking him. Eason, I thought, played fantastic. Of course, the secondary, man, Tyson, Sellers, Barrett, Young. It goes on and on. It's been airtight all year. Weddington couldn't throw the football against the Whirlies. It was the fact that in the fourth quarter, really, Weddington just decided, hey, we're just gonna try to run it down the throat, and eventually they pop one. They gave up a 52-yard run. That was really the difference in that game after they'd been getting 3 yards, 2 yards, 3 yards. Then they finally pop one for 52, and then for the first time all season, the Whirlies are down by more than one score.
All said and done, 2023, 2024, what does Grimsley do different that you see coming up next? Anything they do different next year?
I think the offense looks different just because they don't have, those wide receivers right now, at least, that are just going to, have the huge catch races and take it off the top. I think you're going to see more of a finesse game in the fact that you're going to see maybe some more design quarterback
and maybe some more of those passes to Summers too out of the backfield.
You're going to see a lot more you're going to see a lot more over the middle to Summers. Mm-hmm. Howerton's going to have a huge part,
and Fort Hidalgo, is he back next year?
Yeah,
if Fort is back, I love that name. I just got to love that name.
And then I think they're going to retool some things on defense too, and maybe go to a 3-4 because, like I said, you don't want to leave your best players on the side, but Andre Hill Jr.'s out there, Bakri's out. You got those big guys in the middle that are going to block up that lane. So next year maybe they get a little bit faster on defense. It's a long off season. A lot of these guys are going to go on and play basketball right now.
Now let's get on that too. Since you talked about basketball, you brought it up. Alex Taylor, you've already told us, might play a couple of weeks and then take off to college. What about Bryce Davis? Is he going to play?
He's on the roster
right
now.
Is he practicing?
Yeah, he's on the roster. We'll see how well he practices.
But is he in practice?
He's on the team.
Is he training with the team?
I haven't watched any of them.
Right. As far as you know.
But as far as I know, his intention is to play. And you have Faison Brandon, you have Caton Cato on that team. You have Christian Barrett, who played very well in the secondary for the Whirlies this year. I wouldn't be surprised if you see Christian Barrett as a wide receiver.
Well, all those guys' names being called. If you got Richard Goods, you're halfway home already anyway.
Boy,
you're halfway home.
He looks like a monster.
Oh, he's crazy. Crazy.
Right now, the way I think the Whirlies are going to work him into the offense.
Every ball will go through him, yeah.
Yeah, now that these other guys are going to hit the floor with him. I know they're off to a 1-0 start, but now when you start to see what the offense for the Whirlies and the defense looks like with Goods and these other guys.
Well, the reason I asked about Davis, so concerned about him, is because he had the injury for football. His focus, his emphasis going to college is football. So sometimes you wonder if he'll play basketball to kind of maybe endanger that injury and maybe hurt it again. He's got to focus on football, but if he wants to play, that's his choice, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think
he may want to do something. If he's going to be there the whole year, he may just want to I want to get something done, do something about senior year.
Yeah. I'm sure he's talking about all these things. I mean, what's interesting is, you see we're going to be able to follow kind of some of these guys as this football season winds down. They go into basketball. And that's the other thing is, been following some of these other basketballs, talking to some of these other coaches, and they're all going through the same thing too, in the fact that guys had some of these players on the football team had deep postseason runs. Right. Now you're trying to get them into basketball mode where teamwork is very important, that cohesion you have with 5 guys on the floor.
Well, the wild thing is, to some degree, they've been out of football now. Some of these teams have got beat in the first round in the playoffs. They've been out for about a month. Anyway, Jamias Ferrer at Southern Guilford is just going to rip it off this year because he didn't play any football at all. He would have been among the top 3 quarterbacks in the county. Yeah. It would have been Atmore, would have been Faison Brandon, would have been Ferrer. Last year it was Ryan Stevens. It was Atmore, it was Ballou. Ballou's always been in that mix too. Yeah. But Ferrer, people watch him in Southern Guilford. They're 4-0, and they've beaten some halfway decent teams. They're going to be tough in that Mid-State 3A with Dudley and Smith. And Smith's going to be tough because Smith's got bumpers from Grimsley. Smith's got they got the Kenny Miller Jr. from Southeast. I mean, guys just moved out like crazy. The transfer portal for basketball is bigger than football this past year. It's crazy.
Well, don't say that part out loud.
Too late.
Too late. I mean, we know what's going on.
Oh yeah, and it could change again.
Just to put a bow. It's tough to go down to Matthews, to lose to Weddington when your goal was a state championship. But there was definitely a lot of positives to take away from this season, a lot of enduring memories. I mean, yes, the goal was to win the conference for the Grimsley Whirlies, to win the Metro 4A in conference play, to stay perfect, to beat Page, and they just checked all those things off. And I guess I was just really impressed following them this closely this year, going to the practices and to every game, is to see that mentality that they had when they showed up to the football field. They were locked in and they were focused, and I think that's a testament to the coaching and the culture of the program right there. Week in and week out, regardless of the opponent, they executed that offense, and they executed it for the most part to a very, very high level all season.
Very classy bunch, and a good job by you as always.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
I will be in touch to see you around the horn, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Football in Focus. Next, Bryant Roche from the News and Record checks in. Other guests later. Stay tuned. Football in Focus. We'll be right back.